We're rolling, we're rolling, we're rolling. So, I guess another video is coming through today. I actually had a few videos back when I was making them more frequently on Facebook that I wanted to do but I never got around to, and this is one of the main ones that I guess hung around. So today I wanted to do a video about what I call direct meditation, which is the form of meditation which sort of arose organically in my own process through trial and error that I've discovered for myself to be something that sort of cuts through the confusion, cuts through the traps, cuts through the misdirections, and gets straight to the point, right? So that's why I call it direct meditation. There's no scenic routes, which also means it does produce actual, tangible, definite, and relatively quick results. So that's something to keep in mind. With it, it's a very powerful. And so the subtitle of the video is How to Synchronize Your Brain with Your Body, or How to Synchronize the Brain and the Body. I put out a paper a good, year ago at this point, which is really the culmination of everything I've done, everything I probably will do. It says it all more explicitly than I could ever hope to say it, and is treated to a further illumination in the book I'm about to put out. And that paper was called All Experience is an Upward Spiral of Time Are Two Simultaneous Time Experiences. That's available on my blog, Zebreel, Zebreal, at WordPress, I believe. And it's also available in an audio format on my YouTube channel. So I recommend reading that if you're sort of looking to make the leap, so to speak, into a new, more open, less confused way of existing, which also means a more intense, more direct way of existing. Which means to acknowledge that you do in fact exist, and to acknowledge the reality of your existence, which goes in the opposite direction of the compartmentalization of our thoughts and what we call our mind. Now, mind to me is, at least in our directly experienced way, is nothing more than an amalgamation of sensations, neurological misfirings, and neurological occurrences within the total body. So there's a misconception with meditation that you want to somehow rid yourself or quiet your thoughts. So rid yourself of the thoughts, quiet the thoughts, find some way to exterminate the noise. The difference in my approach is that you're not trying to rid yourself of the thoughts at all. You're trying to allow the thoughts to come into a synchronized operation with the rest of the physical body. So normally the thoughts might be lagging from the rest of the body's experience. The eyes are looking ahead, but the thoughts are somewhere else, preoccupied with something else. You may be eating and thinking of what you had for dinner yesterday. Or you may be talking to someone and thinking about something you'd rather be doing. So what's happened there is that there's a split inside the being that you are into two aspects, what we call the mind, what I refer to as brain time in my essay, and what we call the body, what I refer to as body time in my essay. So it's two different forms of time. There's one time flow, but the mind can be on a separate track while the senses are flowing with the life experience because they have no option to do anything but that, right? So the brain's off in La La Land, the thoughts are off in La La Land, and the body is here in life, in reality. And that's what creates our psychological suffering. So really, in my essay, I described the totality of human experience, the totality of psychology is really a varying sliding scale of degrees of synchronization between the brain's perceptions and the rest of the body's perceptions. So like I said, the solution isn't to stop yourself from thinking. The solution is to allow the thoughts to come into a synchronized flow with the rest of the body's experience. So they're operating as one being, one entity. And so this comes into the practical application of that, which is what I call direct meditation, which I was just beginning my morning with, sitting on my lawn. And direct meditation is probably the easiest form of possible meditation. And that's what might make it difficult, actually, for us. It's because we want some technique, we want some procedural operation where we can make a certain result happen. All we're doing in direct meditation is allowing or letting things flow. Some might say letting things be, but the problem with the word be is it implies bringing things to a halt or bringing things to stillness. Me, I'm more of a Taoist. I think it's more about bringing things into the flow of change that's already there, that is life. So being is flow, being is change, and being is growth. And growth is sometimes uncomfortable, often is uncomfortable. And so what you would do in direct meditation is sit down in some place where you're not distracted, ideally. But if the distraction is there, instead of trying through some breathing technique, through some visualization technique, through some way of focusing on something, all you're doing in direct meditation is you would allow that sensation of distractedness to exist with the rest of the experience. And the same goes for misery. If you're feeling miserable on some level and are just acknowledge that the misery is there, don't deny it, then you would allow yourself to feel miserable. And if you're feeling confused, instead of trying to find some way to negate or combat your confusion, what you would do was allow yourself to feel confused. So instead of finding some way to bring an end to thinking, bring an end to suffering, what you're doing is allowing the suffering to exist with the rest of your experience and allowing the misery to exist with the rest of your experience, where it exists only as a series of sensations, right? Just like everything else. Neutral sensations. And so all you're doing in direct meditation is sitting and allowing the totality of your body to function automatically, and acknowledging that the mind is also part of your physiology. So the totality of the body is functioning automatically. So even the sensation of wanting to direct, wanting to manipulate, wanting to control the experience, which is sort of the default sensation when our time experience is split into two streams, you, instead of trying to control the control, you allow the control to be there. You allow the misery to be there. You allow the confusion to be there. You don't try to become synchronized. You don't try to become wakeful. You don't try to become clear. You don't try to become whole or any of that. You allow yourself to be not whole. You allow yourself to be miserable. You allow yourself to be confused. And you allow yourself to be in conflict with yourself. Because to approach the sensation of self-conflict in a conflicted manner only aggravates the wound, right? If you approach the sensation of self-conflict with a way that says, okay, I am conflicted with myself, as Walt Whitman wrote, do I contradict myself? Okay, therefore I contradict myself. You allow that to be. You allow that to be in the flow. And the fundamental condition of our existence is flow. We can't stop change as much as we might like to try. And the more we try, the more we have to deny the fact of our existence, which is change. And so that requires us to be in two experiences. One, which acknowledges the real reality because it has no choice. It's choiceless, the Zen term, choiceless awareness. And the other type that wants to pretend that this isn't the condition and so is struggling against the change and thinks that it can somehow protect its state, which isn't a wholesome state, which isn't an enjoyable state, but because it's familiar, we grow attached to it. We don't so much get attached to health and freedom and things like that, because freedom is challenging, and freedom is not comfortable, and freedom is open and unprotected and vulnerable. And so we get attached to the experience of comfort, and comfort can be called synonymous with fear and suffering and attachment and a state of seriousness and concern, which is in direct opposition to the peace which you already are. The peace which isn't fighting change, which isn't fighting the urge to let a burp out while you talk, which doesn't have any regard for any of that. So all you're doing in direct meditation is sitting and allowing all the sensations in your head, all the sensations which cause you to feel miserable, which cause you to feel confused, which cause you to feel lost. You allow that to flow with the body. So even the sensation of resistance, you don't resist resistance, you allow it to flow with the rest of the body. And what you'll notice, often I've found, I mean, yes, I do, to be honest, I do use drugs and sometimes to help aid the process. It's just how I am. I'm a shaman hippie. But even without drugs, this is a powerful technique, even without some sort of chemical aid. What you do is you allow, but hey, if that's your thing, if you like playing around with your neurochemistry like me, and you like experimenting, then try it in conjunction with this exercise. But in itself, this is enough to transform you, right? Without any aid, because the body has a natural intelligence which already knows how to do what I'm talking about, which is speaking even now as me, right? And so all you're doing in direct meditation is sitting and allowing the totality of the experience to happen. That's all. Nothing more. No breathing, no focus, no attention, nothing like that. You allow yourself as a total being to become a verb, to become a process. And what you'll notice is the blockages in the mind, the brain, that aspect of ourselves. If you just allow those things to be inside the peace that's already there, inside the flow, inside the softness that's already there, if you allow those things, then very quickly they start to break down because they can't hold unless you're invested in them, invested in maintaining them. You maintain them by attempting to sustain a dual perception of the time stream that's already there, and attempting to control. attempting to manipulate. As Adyashanti says, true meditation is when you don't manipulate your experience. So you'll notice quickly, if you sit and just allow things to be a happening, to be a total automatic happening, that all of a sudden the functioning of the physiology of the body starts to shift over. And this can be uncomfortable or frightening when you're not well acquainted with it, as I am, as probably more and more people are as they experiment. If you're not acquainted with the full scale of different states that come out of different degrees of synchronization between these aspects of your being, then you're going to relate to this change, which is a total, complete change, not just a little nudge. It has to be total or not at all. You're going to relate to that change as a very fearful thing, whether you relate to it as a projection of dying, a projection of going crazy, projection of this, that, and the other. That's because the part of you that's been sustained in resistance to the flow has been taught and conditioned to sustain itself at all costs. So it will use all the excuses it has in the book to convince you as a total being to keep spoon feeding it and keep maintaining it like a squatter in the house, right? The squatter, there doesn't have to be anything strange about this. I've done videos explaining how this can be looked at as some other entity, as another sort of possessing force or something that uses us. But it doesn't have to be looked at in any of these spooky terms. That's just one of my ways of understanding it. And for utilitarian purposes, it might not be the most effective. You don't have to understand that, right? You don't have to understand what the ego is. There's no ego. There's only a dissociation between the brain and the body, which allows the conditions for this sort of mutation or maladaptation to occur and to sustain itself and to interfere with the energetic economy of the total organism. And so all our energy is going to maintaining this false self, right? Instead of being used spontaneously and intelligently in a way that is allowing and creative and not neurotic and not fearful. So as this starts to shift, suddenly there's an abundance of intelligence and energy that's already there inside of the body. The thing is, it's been misdirected. And it's been misdirected to maintain this false self. And so that has to dissolve. As my friend Adam Frewer says, if you're on Facebook, check him out. He posts a lot of good stuff. You have to be okay with allowing your face to melt into presence. When the presence is there, you aren't there, because what you're used to relating to as you is a time gap between the mind and the body. And so in order for you to be fully present, you have to, as you're used to relating to yourself, you as you're used to conceiving of yourself, has to come to a stop, has to come to a close, and allow the totality of your being to express itself naturally. And so to directly synchronize the mind and the body is as simple as giving yourself a space to become a flow which is unconflicted within itself. To simply give yourself a space to allow the kinks to work themselves out. All the time we think we're invested in working through our kinks, working through our confusion. All that does is maintains the confusion. So when we think we're working through something in our brain, in our head, we're usually maintaining that because we're afraid of allowing life to be what it is, of acknowledging the fact that we do exist, and acknowledging the fact that existence is a choiceless thing. You can't opt out of existence except by way of a pistol, and anything else you do to try to fight existence, all it does is interfere with the functioning of your body, the functioning of the energetic economy of your being. And so you just take a space, you sit, and you allow. It's that simple. You allow not control to be not control, misery to be misery, suffering to be suffering, confusion to be confusion. You allow the problem to be the problem, as I've said before in another video. And then the sensitivity of your total being opens up flowers, and everything around you penetrates you, and you, in turn, are directly experiencing it in a very visceral, sensitive, open way, which doesn't have anywhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide in the experience. It's just one flow, one unified experience. What they call oneness is a oneness between you and yourself. It's a oneness between the brain and the body. And I really think what, quote unquote, I've developed here is to toot my own horn, not to toot my own horn, to gladly toot my own horn, is a revolutionary way of cutting through all the confusion, all the blind spots, all of what we call psychology and all of its infinite details, and getting straight to the point directly. The point is you. The point is that you exist. So forget about me, forget about the teachings, forget about all that. All you know is you, all you know is your experience. You don't know anything outside of that experience. In fact, that experience is an absence of knowing, an absence of intellectual knowledge. So the intelligence, when I say intelligence, is not something that has anything to do with the organization of words in a conscious, intentful, directed way. My words organize themselves, and I just have to allow that to occur because the intelligence is something that's there already, that knows far better than me. It's an unconscious, if you want to use the word unconscious, it's a automatic, spontaneous, unconscious intelligence that's there. And so to directly allow that to take control, because it's you, it's the real you, and allow that to express itself is the direct way into the satori of realizing that you do in fact exist, you are in fact alive, and there's no way for you to negate the fact of your own existence except through a process of dividing against yourself. And as I said in my video yesterday, as soon as you're tired of being divided against yourself, then you might be ready to face the absolute condition of the fact that you do exist, and that all the things we preoccupy ourselves with and the thoughts aren't real. The thoughts themselves aren't even real in the way we imagine them to be. But as I said, I think I may have said yesterday, I'm not sure, but if not, I'm saying now. Because even if the thoughts aren't real, even if what we call the self, what we refer to as the self usually, the person, the personality, even if that's not real, it's not bad that it exists. It's not a problem. The problem is the answer to the problem, because once you realize that it's an end within itself and it has no means to go beyond itself, the only means for you at that point is to allow the problem to be the problem, allow the illusion to be the illusion. As soon as you allow the illusion its existence, forget the illusion and accept the illusion, then suddenly the illusion isn't there. As long as you fight the ego is there. The moment you stop fighting the ego, it's suddenly not there, and you're not there to acknowledge it's not there. I wrote before that to lose the ego for you will not be an overwhelming experience. There's so much projection when we're opening up into this. We're going through that really difficult growth phase where we're shedding and letting go and letting go and letting go, seemingly, or more likely holding on, right, as long as we can, until we can't hold on any longer, until we're exhausted by our attempt to hold on to something which isn't there. The moment you don't try to do anything about the ego, suddenly you realize, or you see, there's no ego there. So it can't be an overwhelming experience for you. It's only overwhelming for the ego and its projection of what it's going to be like to go into this pathless, mapless territory of one flow, unified time, self-synchronization. To be totally automatic, totally free of control, totally free of the need to be free, as U.G. Krishnamurti put it. Freedom is the need. Freedom is being free from the need to be free. And enlightenment isn't the destruction of our illusions. It's seeing that there's no illusion there. We create the illusion moment to moment. So the moment you allow yourself to be enough to have a space where anything can present itself on its own terms, suddenly you see the thing you're fighting isn't really there to begin with. And so you don't even see this so much as it just dissipates. And what's left is just an automatic, spontaneously functioning organism, free of the illusion that it is piloting itself, free of the illusion that it needs to defend itself against its own existence, and free of the illusion that there's anything problematic about being alive. Life is a challenge, it's not a problem. It's a challenge for you to acknowledge that you exist. That's the challenge of life. And then once you acknowledge you exist, you have to acknowledge how you exist. And that's another difficult thing. The thing is, as soon as you're synchronized, as soon as you're in a harmonious happening within yourself, as yourself, in a flow, then all the how of how you live has to adapt to that. And there's so many things we convince ourselves that we need to do, which are only there to serve the ideas which make up our false sense of self. And so to live in a way which is true to you, to be true to yourself, which is the whole being, you're gonna have to adapt naturally and effortlessly, but still with pain and with a challenge, and to adapt to a way of existing which acknowledges existence as it is and not as we've been taught to relate to it as. And all of this will happen naturally if you just take the sword I've given you, and the sword that I've given you by telling you it's already in your hands, and allow the sword to, of its own nature, cut the binds that are there. So this was a long video, but what's encoded in my words, what's encoded in the essay that I mentioned, all of our experiences an upward spiral of time are two simultaneous time experiences. And that's available on my blog, like I said. I'm just repeating this so you know. I'll put it in the description, so maybe I don't have to repeat it. And also my YouTube. And to really nail the point home, if you want, also listen to my novella, The Indwelling, which is available as an audiobook free on my YouTube. How generous. But it's also available on Amazon for a one-time low price of $13, I think, $13.50. I'll put that in the description. That pairs well with the time lag essay because it's a more metaphorical, whimsical depiction of it, just as my upcoming book, Elephant Tuscas. So definitely feels good to be expressing, letting my non-message come through again, and acknowledging the fact that I exist with you.